Hello, this is John. I have a story for you. This is a story that is an old story, an old, ancient story indeed from the cold lands of the north. And it tells us of giants. There used to be giants stomping all over the earth in those days. There are still signs of them all around the hills and the fields of southern England. We have the Long Man of Wilmington, the outline of a giant stamped in the chalk downs just along the coast of Sussex from where I am right now. We have the Cerne Abbas giant over in Dorset waving his club, so to speak. We have all of the earthworks and mounds and great ruins of the works of giants that the early English saw in the land around them. They knew that these monstrous, mighty beings had trod the ground that they walked upon. But you don't see them so much anymore. In Iceland, by the later Middle Ages, then the stories were written down which tell us of what became of the giants. These stories say that before any of the earth was made, then there was the first of the giants, Ymir, the first being of all, you might say, who stirred in the great emptiness of Ginnunga Gap, the void that was there before the world. Off to the north of Ginnunga Gap, there was Niflheim, a land of frost and cold. And down to the south of Ginnunga Gap, there was Muspelheim, a land of heat and vapours. And it is said that the clouds of cold air billowed down from Niflheim, and the hot, steamy vapours welled up from Muspelheim, and they met in the middle in Ginnunga Gap. And the cold was thawed, and the steam was thickened, and the two together mixed and made a long line of rimy muck that stretched across the middle of Ginnunga Gap, and it was there that Ymir, the giant, stood. And Ymir followed along the gap in the footsteps of Aldumla, perhaps an even older being. Aldumla was not a giant, was not a mortal human like you or I. Aldumla was a cow that walked the line of rimy muck in Ginnunga Gap and licked at that muck, licking up and swallowing down all the salts and goodness that were in it. And Ymir walked along behind, gathering up great clots of creamy milk that fell from Aldumla's udders and swallowing them all down. Now back there, at the very, very beginning of things, for Ymir, this first giant being, this first two-legged, maybe human-shaped creature ever to exist, there was no such thing as gender. There was no male and female. Ymir was both. And so Ymir's body started to produce new life all by itself. New giants grew from every nook and cranny, from out underneath Ymir's sweaty armpits and round the back of Ymir's knee and out behind the back of Ymir's ears, and every crevice in that cragged form produced new giants until the community of giants filled Ginnunga Gap. And they were mighty, and they were monstrous, but they were noble beings who had their way with all that there was. Until Aldamla, the cow, wandering along the gap, licking at the rimy milk, began to uncover a forehead, a face, head and shoulders, and a chest and arms and legs and a whole body of another being, a new being. And this being had children with one of the female giants whose name was Bestla. And their children were new beings again. And the first of these new beings to be born were 3 brothers, and their names were Vili and Ve and Odin. For these new beings were not giants, they were the first of the Aesir, the gods. And they looked up at the giants all around them, and they were scared. But they were all so proud and confident in their power, and like so many proud, confident, powerful people, they didn't like being scared. They couldn't handle being scared. They looked to blame their fear on the other people around them who were not like them, whom they found so distressing in their strangeness. They decided that they were going to wage war upon the giants and rule this new creation all for themselves. So that is what they did. Odin and his brothers and all of the Aesir, they waged the first war that the world ever knew against those mighty beings that had bestrode Ginnunga Gap in that time before time. And because it was a time before time, that war might have lasted an eternity. I could not possibly say. But it shook Ginnunga Gap from Niflheim in the north to Muspelheim in the south. And it was bloody, and it was brutal. But in the end, it was the gods who were victorious. It was the gods who broke the might of the giants. And it was the gods who brought Ymir, the first giant of all, crashing down, dead in Ginnunga Gap, their enormous form filling all of that great primeval void. And then Odin and his brothers began to create the earth from the body of Ymir. This vast shape that filled Ginnunga Gap, they took it, and from Ymir's bones they made the rocks and the mountains. From Ymir's flesh they made the soil upon which we walk. From Ymir's hairs they made the grass that grows upon the earth and all of the trees and the flowers. From Ymir's blood they made the streams and the rivers and the ocean that circles the world round. They took Ymir's skull and they set it up to make the huge dome of the sky above the earth. They took Ymir's two great cragged eyebrows and they placed them upon the earth to make a compound, to make a wall, to make Midgard, the yard, the guard, the court, the fortress in the middle. In that middle earth, that is where we live. That is where the gods placed the first people to appear, to live protected by those mighty walls in a space where we could have our way, as long as it complied with the will of the gods. And all of the remaining giants, all of those vast creatures, those mighty and monstrous forms, well, they were expelled out, driven back by the gods beyond the walls of Midgard. And they walk the wild spaces, prowling the mountainsides, wandering the wintry slopes, plunging in the deepest seas. But the story tells us they are still out there. They are still wandering the wilds. And as we have seen, the marks of their deeds are still written upon the hills and the mountainsides of the world that we know. And one day, when Loki rides from the cold land of hell, and when Surt the fire giant breaks through the wall with his flaming sword, then all of the giants will come back to seek their revenge upon Odin and the Aesir for pushing them out and taking away their birthright. And on that day, Ragnarok, all of Odin's plan will come crashing down. But if you and I are here to see it, then you or I might be lucky enough to see that when the rage has burned out and all war has passed, then there shall be a time of healing and of peace, when old gods and new will sit down together upon the slopes of a new field of grass that will rise from the waters, and the world will begin again. And who knows, maybe all will be well. Thank you for listening.